to welcome you all to this session with Mr. Venu Rajamoni sir as a part of our annual Fest colloquium. His Excellency is an Indian diplomat who belonged to the Indian Foreign Service. He was born in Thiruvananthapuram, Kerala, where he did his primary education. He holds a degree in politics from Kerala University. He completed his post-graduation in international studies from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. He began his career as a journalist in 1983 and qualified for IFS in 1986. He has served as a diplomat in Indian missions in Hong Kong, Beijing, Geneva, Dubai, and Washington, D.C. He held the post of the press secretary to the President of India from 2012 to 2017. He was the ambassador of India to the Netherlands from 2017 to 2020. He was also the permanent representative of India to the Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. On September 17, 2021, he has assumed the post of officer on special duty, external cooperation in the state government of Kerala. Also, he is serving as a concurrent faculty of diplomatic practice at the Jindal Global School, Sonipat, Haryana. We hope his presence would inspire you all and help you to understand the life of a diplomat. Before beginning the session, we would like to list out a few instructions for all the audience. First, it would be highly appreciated if you all could switch on your videos. We will be taking pictures during the session. Second, please keep your mic muted throughout the event. Third, kindly take note not to interrupt the guest. Fourth, please maintain decorum during the course of the event. Fifth, questions for the speaker can be put in the chat box. However, we will be taking selected few questions due to the shortage of time. Sixth, any concern could be shared with us, the organizing committee, via chat or text. The contact can be found in the WhatsApp group you have been added to. Failure to keep up with any of the aforementioned rule may compel the council to remove the participant from the meeting. Once again, I would like to extend a very hearty welcome to our esteemed guest. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Adarsh. Thank you, Amani. And thank you, Dikshit Goel, who's the one who was in touch with me. And good evening to each and every one of you. It is, I see 66 participants. So it is wonderful to meet and interact with all of you. I'm delighted to know that there is a civil services forum in St. Stephen's College, which caters to civil services aspirants. I'm even more happy to see such dynamism in young people. I think St. Stephen's has a very formidable reputation. You're amongst the brightest and the best in our country when you come into St. Stephen's, and every year there are a large number of people from St. Stephen's who join the civil services. So it is only natural that all of you, or there is such a large number of aspirants in St. Stephen's College. But truly, my compliments to Dikshit Goel and to the entire team. I was very impressed with the persistence with which he pursued me. I think he first contacted me in September last year or so, and then yes, I was busy with various things, but he kept at it, and so there was, till I had no option to say
we
no.
We surely want you to have us involved.
I had to come. So very, very happy to be here, and I hope you will all find this session fruitful. I had the title that I had given for the session was Life of an Indian Diplomat. And what I thought that I would address with you in this discussion is to give you a flair of what is the life of a diplomat. I think to some extent, in the introduction, you have got a sense of the kind of postings I've had, and I will elaborate on them. So I'm not going to specifically talk about what you should study or what you should not study, but I'm very happy to try and address many of them in the question answer session. Though I would say that in terms of how to prepare for the exams, perhaps the youngest people who have recently who got into the service would be the best guides to all of you, because they have written the exam several times. They know the pattern of questions. I'm a little outdated in that. However, I was a member of the Civil Services Board, so I know how the interviews go. And we can, without divulging anything confidential, I'm very happy to give you general tips on that in the Q&A session. The theme of life of a diplomat, I think, is something which is of direct concern also to all of you who eventually make it, in terms of trying to decide what service to opt for and what is the difference between the IAS, between the Foreign Service, between the police service and the other services. So in that sense, I hope this talk will also enable all of you to start formulating your thinking on where you want to go and what service you want to opt to, in the confidence that most of you will make it, if not all. So once again, compliments to all of you for organizing such a wonderful civil services forum. Thank you for inviting me, and all the very best for the future, for your studies in the civil service, for your studies in St. Stephen's, and for your civil services exams whenever you choose to appear in them. But to start off about the life of a diplomat, I have to give you a little bit of more background. Why I chose the Foreign Service was fairly straightforward. My subject at my undergraduate level was political science. I studied, as was mentioned in the introduction, I studied in Cochin, in what is known as Maharaja's College of Ernakulam, which is one of the oldest and most prestigious colleges in Ernakulam. And I graduated with political science in my BA. So as part of my political science studies, I discovered that it was international relations which fascinated me the most. And at that point of time, the best place in the country to go and study international relations, even now, probably it is the best place to study international relations, was Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. So after my BA, I applied to JNU and I got admission into JNU in MA in the School of International Studies. Then I moved to JNU and I had a wonderful 2 years in JNU. Wonderful, not just in terms of studies, but also in terms of out-of-class activities, let me say. I led a very vibrant and lively life in that period. My current wife of over 36 years is someone I met in JNU. She comes from Darjeeling, West Bengal. Well, as you know, I come from Kerala. And we had many, many wonderful friends, all of whom, large number who are in the civil services and many others who are doing extremely well in their chosen professions in various parts of the world. So having studied MA International Studies, after my MA, I went back to Kerala and I joined for law. And while studying law, I had a compulsion to find a job quickly. We can discuss that later. I do not want to digress now. So then I started looking around for what jobs I could easily find in Cochin at that time. And one of the first jobs which came my way was as staff correspondent of the Indian Express. So I joined the Indian Express and I worked with Indian Express for almost 2.5 years. And I wrote the civil service exams while I was working for the Indian Express and I was studying law part-time. I joined initially in the regular classes, then shifted to the evening classes for law. And the two subjects that I chose for my civil services at that point of time, one was political science and international relations, and the other was law. Incidentally, I also come from a family of lawyers. My father was a senior lawyer. So I had, in terms of law, I had plenty of access to books and support at home for any queries or questions I had. That made it much easier. But essentially, so the subjects I studied is what I took as options for the civil service exams. And in terms of what service to choose, I was very clear that having studied international studies, having studied diplomacy, the logical follow-through of that studies was a career in the Foreign Service. So right from the beginning, my first option was for the Foreign Service. I wrote the civil service exams twice. Both times I cleared the preliminary exams. I know these days even preliminary has become very difficult. Then in the mains, the first time I made it into the postal service. In my first attempt, I think my written marks were much higher, but for some reason my interview marks came low. So I didn't make it to the top. But the second time around, my interview marks were excellent, but my written marks were still a little low, but still I made it into the civil services. In the first, my All India rank was number 13 or so. And within the Foreign Service, I was the topper of that batch. So having said this, the life of an Indian diplomat normally begins with training at the Civil Services Academy, the National Academy of Administration in Mussoorie, where everyone who's selected that year go together. And that is a wonderful experience. Initially you wonder, like, what does Foreign Service have to do with everyone coming together in the Academy of Administration, and some of the what you hear and see there are all sometimes a repetition of what you have already studied and you already know. So it can get a little boring. But what stands you in good stead forever is the bonding that you establish with your batchmates, the friendships that you make in the National Academy of Administration, most of which stand in good stead even today for me. And that subsequently, once you join the Foreign Service, you spend the bulk of your career outside the country. You come in for short stints in Delhi in the Ministry of External Affairs, but your jobs are invariably very busy, not giving you enough time to socialize, while your IAS, IPS, and other batchmates are also spread out across the country as well as in the central government. So that initial bonding, that initial networking, like all of you from Stephens, I think people support each other and help each other the moment you're here, you're a Stephenian. Similarly, with the civil service, also when you say you're part of the batch, my batch was 1986, that brings about an immediate camaraderie, and it gives you the ability to ring up anyone, anywhere in the country, irrespective of what they are doing, and to ask them for help or support or information or assistance in pushing through certain projects, etc. So that was the highlight of the Mussoorie experience. But then you go on to the Foreign Service Institute in Delhi. In my times, the Foreign Service Institute was very nascent. It was just 2 years old. Now it is much better established. So you have several months. It has varied from, I think, year to year or from dean to dean. But for approximately a year or less, you have various kinds of training programs in the Foreign Service Institute, after which you are asked to go abroad and study a foreign language. Now, mastery over one foreign language, and English is not considered a foreign language, is something which is considered an absolute must for any foreign service officer, and that is something which the Foreign Ministry leaves in store, puts a lot of emphasis on at all times. So the study of the foreign language is one of the first decisions any foreign service officer is asked to take. I chose Chinese because I got I had studied some French in school, and I thought if I study Spanish, between French, Spanish, and English, I can conquer the world and I can go wherever, I can communicate with people at all times. But I met a very senior foreign service officer who had retired and who was a professor in JNU. And he advised me that when you are given an opportunity to learn a language, go for the most difficult language, not the easiest language. Languages like French and Spanish can be learned very easily. So I took that advice sensibly, and then I looked around, and amongst the difficult languages, I thought China and Chinese is it is both the most difficult language, and it is also the country which is always going to be important for India. Whether we have good relations or bad relations, it is our biggest neighbor. It is sitting on a Himalayan frontier. In those days, I joined the service in '86. Already China was becoming the economic success that it hugely is today. So all this persuaded me to take Chinese as an option. And I was sent to Hong Kong, to the University of Hong Kong, to learn Chinese, and in Chinese, Mandarin, which is the northern dialect, which is not spoken locally in Hong Kong, but which is the official dialect of Chinese. So I spent 2 years at the University of Hong Kong learning Chinese, which again is was a very memorable experience. It was a struggle at the age of, I got in at the age of 26. So at 26, it's not easy to go back to basics and start to learn how to write a language or how to speak a language, try and speak without people being able to understand you, and the difficulties in reading, all of which are very complex. Again, I can go into it in the Q&A session if required. But the highlight of my stay in Hong Kong, where I was the third secretary, language training, was learning Chinese, the most difficult language. And I'm very proud that my language skills are very good. I speak fluent Chinese. I can read Chinese. I can write Chinese on computers or on the phone. And this is a skill which, from the early stages of my career till now, has always stayed with me. I even participated in a competition for foreigners who could speak Chinese, and came out first in it while I was in Hong Kong. So after Hong Kong, then I went on to Beijing, where I served initially as third secretary. Then I got my promotions. So I became second secretary in charge of press, information, and culture. Now, for those who follow India-China relations, the landmark year in India-China relations was 1988, when Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi visited China, held discussions with the Chinese leadership. And till then, our relationship was more or less frozen because of the border dispute and all that had happened following the border dispute. But a decision was taken between Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi and the Chinese leadership that we will, while we continue to address the border dispute, we continue to discuss the border dispute, we will not let that interfere with improvement of relations in all other fields. And that decision in '88 is what opened the path for a vast improvement of relations between India and China in all fields, which unfortunately once again came to a halt with what happened in Galwan, which all of you must be reading about. But anyway, so I went in at a time when China was opening up, India-China relations were starting to improve in a big way. It was starting to improve in a manner it had not happened the previous 2 decades or more. And I was lucky because I had the responsibilities for information, culture, and education. I had wide contacts with Chinese society. I had contacts with Chinese intellectuals, Chinese scholars, Chinese students, Indian students who went to China to study Chinese language and other subjects. So that helped tremendously improve my Chinese language abilities, to build my confidence. I produced a magazine called India Digest in Chinese on behalf of the embassy. I would travel with our ambassadors across the country. I would interpret for the ambassador or for other visiting delegations. And I had a fascinating time. Many people in India tend to think of China with suspicion and as an enemy and as a country to be scared of. But at least my experience as a young diplomat was one of meeting some of the nicest Chinese possible, people who love India, people who know more about India than any one of us probably do, people who are Sanskrit scholars, philosophy scholars, music experts, dancers, dance experts, theater experts. So a wide spectrum of Chinese intellectuals who knew India, who loved India, had all been cut off from India because of bad political relations. And they were overjoyed that once again, normalcy was coming in, the embassy was reaching out, I was going and meeting them, we were welcoming them for events in the embassy, we would arrange Bollywood movie screenings for them, we would have cultural delegations visiting from India and interacting with them, and we would reach out to the Chinese think tanks in the field of foreign policy, international relations, discuss issues, debate issues. So that period, which was say 87 to 90, I was in Hong Kong. 90 to 93 was my stint in Beijing, as in my first stint in Beijing. Was a wonderful time when I learned a lot, when I consolidated my language skills, when I made a large number of Chinese friends, and I traveled across China. And my work was greatly appreciated by my seniors as well as all visiting delegations. So 93, I returned to Delhi, and normally the pattern, while there are lots of exceptions to it, normally the pattern in the Foreign Service is that you spend 2 terms outside, 10 years outside of roughly 3 years each, and you come back to Delhi to spend 2 to 3 years in Delhi. So I returned to Delhi, and in Delhi, I did 2 jobs. That was a time when Dr. Manmohan Singh had come to power. The economic reforms were initiated. Dr. Manmohan Singh was finance minister at that time, 91. Economic reforms were initiated under Prime Minister Narasimha Rao. So I was initially on what was called the Economic Coordination Unit, which was involved in promoting investments into India, trade into India, business links into India, which involved working closely with the Confederation of Indian Industry, FICCI, etc. So this was an entirely new world to me, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and I had great interactions with the business community in India as well as with foreign business delegations, and I was part of the team which was involved in building up the economic strengths of MEA. Till then, one of the biggest criticism of MEA was that MEA only focused on political matters, and as different from that, we were the pioneers, and to a large extent, I think the economic reforms was the reason MEA got involved so much in the economic aspects that we were part of a team trying to give a modern economic face to MEA. From there, I went on to do another job in Delhi, which was in the office of the official spokesperson, where I was responsible for interaction with the media, with foreign media in Delhi, with the Indian media who cover foreign affairs, with organizing the visits, the media part of visits of prime ministers and presidents abroad, with organizing the media part of incoming visits. We had a big SAARC summit, we had to set up a media center, etc. So once again, by virtue of my journalistic background, I thought this was important. It's something I enjoyed, and that gave me opportunity to see how the spokesperson's office works within MEA and to establish wide-ranging contacts with the media within India. Following this stint, I was sent to Geneva, where I worked as in the Indian mission to the United Nations. The headquarters of the United Nations is New York, but the second most important place for the UN is Geneva, where a lot of things happen. And at that time, today it is called the Council on Human Rights, but at that time it was called the Commission on Human Rights. And my responsibility was human rights and humanitarian affairs. And as a first secretary in charge of human rights and humanitarian affairs, I found my work in Geneva absolutely wonderful. I thought it was a culmination of everything that I had studied and my interests, because human rights is a conjunction of both law and political science and international relations. Human rights in the international arena, in the UN, it requires both knowledge of both these subjects to do well. And it is fascinating, within the UN, it is said that the human rights arena is the most political after the Security Council. And by political, you mean that is where countries squabble, they fight with each other, they jostle for influence, they form groupings to outmaneuver others. So I had a wonderful time doing all this, and India is a very respectable name. That is when I also discovered that there is a very high degree of respect for India in the international community amongst for Indian diplomats, amongst all other diplomats. One, because India is truly seen as unique. We are a large country, a developing country, but a democracy which believes in rule of law and has a commitment to human rights. We have our failings, the world knows that also. But still, when you look at it in the enormity of all that is happening in the world, India is one of the biggest success stories going. So there is a lot of support for India from various diplomats across the world, from various countries across the world. Any initiative that we take in the UN, especially in a large assembly, generates a lot of support. And similarly, Indian diplomats are regarded very highly because they read issues, they understand issues, they are able to articulate the views well. And because India takes views which are fairly unique, which are not like all Western countries taking a view together, or China taking a view, or Russia taking a view. So we have a character where we combine the best of the West and the East, Asia and the rest of the world. Our international vision, which has emerged from the days Nehru was our prime minister, from our independence movement, but also the manner in which India functions today and India sees its role in the world. So all that comes out in the UN very naturally, very automatically, by virtue of your education and training. And this is very highly regarded by the UN and by all the other diplomats there. So that was again a great time I had, after which I went back to China on a second stint. I don't want to take too much time to leave you enough time for question and answers. So I will fast forward a bit. So I went back to China, where I went back to the political section, where I worked initially as Council of Political, looking at India-China political relations. Then I was briefly number 2 in the embassy in Beijing. And then again, I came back to Delhi. In Delhi, I was the head of office of Foreign Minister Yashwant Sinha. We call it Director in the External Affairs Minister's office, so which gave me an opportunity to see foreign ministry, foreign policy and diplomacy through the foreign minister's eyes. I was by his side in all his important meetings. I was helping him prepare for his speeches, for his meetings, for his discussions, for negotiations. So all that gave me a ringside view into what the whole foreign ministry does. And then I went to Washington, D.C., where I worked in the Indian Embassy in Washington, D.C., once again as Minister in Press, Information and Culture, but at a time when the India-US nuclear deal was being discussed. So I was part and parcel of the efforts by the Indian Embassy to gather, to mobilize support for the India-US nuclear deal within the US, using our links to the US Congress, using the Indian diaspora, using Friends of India across the US, etc. And then I came back to, from Washington, D.C., I was sent to Dubai, where I worked as Consul General of India in Dubai. And that again is an extremely special position, because there are 3.5 million Indians working in, living in Dubai. And these Indians constitute all segments of the society. The large majority are workers and people at the lower end of the spectrum who have a lot of problems. We have issues like women being trafficked. We have exploitation of labor, all of which you as the Consul General are supposed to address and find solutions. And unlike the IAS in India or the IPS, where you have the rule of law, you have the police forces, you can't enforce anything there. So it is entirely your diplomatic skills and your good offices with the UAE leadership that can help you produce results that are of benefit to your countrymen. So it was an extremely challenging task, but once again, very enjoyable because of the community you had, because of the friends you had, and the support you had. I also discovered that the Arabs in UAE and across the Gulf are amongst the best friends of India. We in India have not known them well, they have neglected them, but many of them, especially their elder generation, came to India for medical treatment, came to India for studies, and have very warm feelings towards India. So having done my stint in Dubai, then I went on to, I returned to Delhi, and I was initially in the Ministry of Finance, doing the job of Joint Secretary Multilateral Institutions, which involved being responsible for World Bank, Asian Development Bank, the IMF, etc. So which again was international economic diplomacy through the Ministry of Finance, something completely new for me. And then when the finance minister, the then finance minister Pranab Mukherjee became the president, I was invited to join him in Rashtrapati Bhavan as press secretary to the president, once again by virtue of my media background, by virtue of my foreign service background, my media connections. I got that position and I worked with him for almost 5 years, after which I went to as ambassador to the Netherlands. When I was in the UAE, I culminated my tenure bringing out a book called India and the UAE, in celebration of a legendary friendship. When I went to Netherlands, straight away I had already decided I want to bring out a similar book for the Netherlands. And I was very happy that before my tenure ended, I brought out a book called India and the Netherlands, Past, Present and Future, the first copy of which was released or was received by His Majesty the King of Netherlands at a grand function with the Queen present, large number of ambassadors, ministers, other important political people. And that worked as a curtain raiser for the visit of the King and Queen of Netherlands to India on a state visit. In fact, our president is going to go to Netherlands in a return visit very soon. And something I didn't mention, somewhere towards the end of my second stint in Beijing, I also was selected for a fellowship which was instituted by Asia Foundation for Mid-Career Diplomats. I went to Washington, D.C. I spent 6 months in Washington, D.C. at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. I traveled all over the US. I visited universities, US and Canada. I gave talks on Indian foreign policy, and I wrote a monograph called India and China, a soft balance of power in the making. And all this material is available on the net. You can all go and search. So the highlight of my stay in the Netherlands, once again, was I was able to bring a lot of innovative ideas. Netherlands has many responsibilities. One is the bilateral relationship, but as was mentioned in the introduction, I was also permanent representative to the Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. I was also responsible for the International Court of Justice and the Permanent Court of Arbitration, which have their seat in The Hague. I was part of the team which defended or which sort of took India's case to the International Court of Justice on the matter of Kulbhushan Jadhav, and which won the case against Pakistan. During my stay, the King and Queen of Netherlands came to India, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands came to India, the Indian Prime Minister came to Netherlands, 3 chief ministers visited the Netherlands. I also wrote a book following the biggest floods in Kerala in 2018, which was the biggest floods in 100 years. I thought, living in Netherlands, and the Netherlands are acknowledged leaders in the world in water management because they have faced floods for centuries. And the very word Netherlands signifies how much under the water they are and how they have a close association with water throughout their history. So I wrote a book called What We Can Learn from the Dutch, Rebuilding Kerala Post-Floods 2018, which was released in the Netherlands and in Kerala, and a Malayalam version of it was released in Trivandrum by the Chief Minister and the Leader of Opposition and the former Chief Minister after I retired and came back in January of 2021. So I gave this long and elaborate discussion, story of my life so that it brings all of you a sense of the variety of challenges, the variety of opportunities that a Foreign Service officer has, the kind of exposure you get to different parts of the world, the kind of responsibilities. My responsibility is only one responsibility, and there is much, much more which everybody else does, but this is just a little flavor. So it is a fascinating job, the Foreign Service. It's a very challenging job because not only do you need to know your country well, you also need to know the world. You need to know the host country to which you are sent. You need to be good at languages. You need to learn a language and be able to use it as well as possible. You need to be good at reading. You need to be good at writing. You need to be good at speaking. You need to be good at making friends and living and adjusting to new cultures, new food habits. You need to have a healthy curiosity in everything that you find in the world, that you see in society all around. And if all these skills, like I'm saying all this not to scare any one of you, but if all these skills you can start developing now itself as young students in St. Stephen's, I'm sure you will sail through the civil services without any difficulty, you will be able to choose whatever service you want. But I hope a large number of you will also choose the foreign service, because it is certainly one of the most attractive and challenging jobs that you can have in your lives. Thank you very much. Happy to take your questions.
Thank you so much, sir. It was such an intriguing session. And like listening to your experiences has seriously pushed our the insights to be an IS officer and IFS officer. We would definitely inculcate all the qualities that are highlighted by you. So, sir, we have a couple of questions in our chat box. So the first question says, like, how has pandemic changed the life of an Indian diplomat and their working efficiency?
Sorry, could you repeat that? There's a little bit of an echo when you speak.
Oh, sorry, sir. So how has the pandemic changed the life of Indian diplomats and their working efficiency?
Okay. The pandemic has changed the lives not just of Indian diplomats, but of all diplomats across the world. And just like everybody else, including you students and teachers, we have all learned to work online. So through we cannot shut down an embassy. The embassy has to, pandemic or no pandemic, there are problems, there are crises. In fact, one of the first challenges I confronted in the Netherlands was people stranded. Countries suddenly put up barriers and said, we don't want people from the outside coming in. And I had a whole bunch of Indians stranded in the Netherlands who were on holidays in Europe, who were transiting from Latin America to India, or coming from North America to India. And they could, because North America had also put up their barriers, they could not go back, they could not come to India, they were not wanted in the Netherlands, and they didn't even have visas, many of them. So there was great chaos, and the embassy had to immediately swing into action, go into the airport, talk to the immigration authorities, talk to the Foreign Office, tell them, look, this is a humanitarian situation. You need to give them, you need to enable them come out and have access to hotel rooms, medical treatment for people who needed medicines. There was a lady who delivered a baby while being stranded in the Netherlands. So for all that, the embassy had to swing into action and gear up and look after them. And then we had to negotiate with India and because sort of negotiate for special flights to take them back. The Indian government is fairly liberal when it comes to problems of Indians abroad. So we had the resources and we used the resources to accommodate them, to give them food. And you know how Indians are. They don't want Dutch food, they want Indian food. So there would be, in the sort of an Indian restaurant was commissioned to create dal roti, sabji packets and send it to them in the hotel, and organize tests for them, get diabetes medicines for patients required, make sure that the baby who was born was doing well, and so was the mother. So it was a fascinating challenge. I'm just once again giving an example of the Netherlands, but across the world, in terms of our regular routine diplomatic work, what happened was, whenever we had a requirement, we would reach out to the foreign ministry. Everyone quickly shifted onto Zoom and other online meetings. With India, we would have meetings. The Prime Minister addressed ambassadors. The Foreign Minister would have meetings with ambassadors. So we tried to, while we couldn't have large gatherings, we tried to move online as much as possible. In my first 2 years in the Netherlands, I had organized some of the biggest International Yoga Day celebrations possible in the most prestigious venues of the Netherlands. But in the midst of the pandemic, then I said, okay, let us think of how we can do an International Yoga Day celebrations online. And that was in some ways limiting, but in some ways it was also liberating. It was limiting because obviously you are not all coming together to do yoga, or that sense of community is not there. You are separated by these videos and the camera and the distance. But the liberating part was you could get people from anywhere in the world now that you were online. So I had Sri Ravi Shankar send a message from Bangalore, and I had some film stars come in from Bombay. So we just went all over the world and got whoever contacts we could find, and we found Dutch experts to come and speak on yoga. We had the Dutch defense minister who sent us a special message saying the Dutch army has taken up yoga so that in conflict situations they can retain peace of mind. So we innovated, and we did lots of things using the online medium. but at the same time made sure that the embassy functions continue as possible. People lose passports, people need visas, there are emergencies. So while the embassy was officially closed, on a very skeletal basis, 2-3 people would go with lots of COVID restrictions and COVID protocols. Individual people with problems would be permitted to come in, special arrangements for hotlines, etc. were set up. So a series of things had to be done to shift your operations to be COVID friendly or to be adequate in COVID conditions. But I think I did it in Netherlands, and embassies abroad, Indian diplomats abroad, very quickly and very smoothly made the transition.
Yeah. So, sir, we have another question. So, as a bureaucrat, there are several confidential things which you are dealing with. So, how to make balance between professional life and social life? Like how to keep them things confidential and how to balance out?
Well, how do I say? Well, I don't think confidential has anything to do with professional life and social life. And honestly, I had, I don't know how many of you think on those lines, but I had a young man come and ask me in the civil services, do you have work-life balance? And that totally threw me off balance because nobody had asked me about it. And I think people of my generation did not even think in those terms. For us, finding any job was a great thing, and getting a civil services job was the biggest thing, and you never thought of work-life balance. But to come back to social life, yes, you work hard, you have a lot of pressures, you have a lot of challenges, but you have also plenty of opportunity to have fun, to socialize, to pursue your interests and your passions. And the Foreign Service in particular is a profession where socializing is part of your profession. Socializing is part of your work. You know, in almost every capital, there are about 120 to 140 countries who have their embassies, any major capital. They all have their national days, and you're invited for all the national days. The host government invites you for various things. There are other special occasions, a food festival, a trade festival, a trade exhibition, a business delegation. So you're constantly meeting your colleagues and counterparts in the diplomatic community, and you very quickly become very close friends. And wherever we are in, we from India are there, you reach out to the Indian diaspora, and there are big diaspora communities all over the world. UAE and Dubai as one of the biggest. Netherlands has the biggest in mainland Europe after UK. So there are plenty of Indians who invite you, who want to meet you, who you interact with. So you have your diplomats, you have your Indian community, you have your host country, their diplomats, their parliamentarians, their writers, their media, their intellectuals whom you're meeting with. And much of this interaction often happens over lunches, over dinners, over parties. People make fun of the Foreign Service and say it is life is going from one cocktail party to the other. While you do attend a lot of cocktail parties, a good professional diplomat goes into each party and says, what is it that I can get from my work out of this party? You may be going for a National Day reception, but if that say you're going for the National Day reception of China in the Netherlands, so that is an opportunity for me to go and meet the Chinese ambassador, meet Chinese diplomats, find out from them what they think about what is happening in Galwan, or what is the latest which is happening in Beijing vis-a-vis President Xi Jinping, or how is China-Russia relations developing, or China-US relations developing. And not only do I get Chinese diplomats in a Chinese National Day function, every Dutch expert who specializes in China would be invited there. Every Dutch officer who deals with China, or businessman who deals with China, would be there. So it's a whole host of information that I have access to through each one of these social gatherings, which both are enjoyable for the food and for the company, but also give you adequate intellectual material to come back and write reports back home and to educate India and India's larger understanding about what is happening in the world. And sometimes there are suggestions and ideas which come up from these meetings, or sometimes even something that the Chinese embassy does to celebrate their National Day. which becomes an idea for you to do something even better when you organize your National Day. So there is lots of socializing, there is lots of fun, but there's lots of work, and they all merge very seamlessly.
Yes, so this gave a better insight towards this question. So, sir, like one more thing, when you're talking about the interview, so there are certain like instances where we have some uncertain questions. So, like, can you give some tips for attending interview? Like, do candidates appearing for exams after PG has any advantage over candidates appearing after undergraduate in interviews? Like, so is there any difference between?
I didn't hear clearly the question in the middle. You asked me.
Yeah, so I'll repeat it. So, like, do candidates appearing after post-graduation?
That is the last part that I got. Earlier, was there a question in it?
Yeah, so like, so when there are instances like you don't get what you want. So how to overcome those uncertain questions in the interview?
Uncertain questions, if you don't know the answer.
Yeah, like how to overcome that thing.
So the interview board I was part of had a wonderful chairman who was a member of the UPSC, a former IAS officer. And he went out of the way to make the candidates comfortable and to tell them right at the beginning, have a cup of water, relax, don't worry, don't feel under pressure. If you do not know anything, the answer to a question, just be honest and tell us you don't know the answer to that question. Nobody expects someone to know everything about everything. And when you have 6, 7 people sitting on an interview board, sometimes people, and you know, this is also the UPSC picks people from various backgrounds. And you may have an oddball who asks some very difficult questions. So you can't help it. So, but what the board judges you is not entirely by the content of what you answer, but how you answer, the confidence with which you present yourself, and your, on one hand, your honesty in saying, look, I don't know anything about it, but also your ability to speak well about the subjects you know and you're passionate about. In fact, once again, in my board, the chairman at the end of it say, okay, we have asked you so many questions. Is there something you want to say on your own? So if you had particularly prepared for something, then he would give you an opportunity to give that spiel also, so that you are 100% sort of confident and 100% you're not insecure in any manner. You are speaking in a relaxed manner. And as to the question of postgraduate or undergraduate, I don't think it makes a difference, but in my experience, what truly makes a difference, and once again, it goes back to what I was saying, is your involvement in other activities. You should not be just a bookworm. Going and writing exams is not enough. Participate in debates, participate in quiz competitions, organize, be a leader by organizing events like the Civil Services Forum. Invite, go out into the world and find talented people, talk to them, invite them for talks and for interactions. All this boosts your confidence. And this confidence automatically comes out during an interview when people ask you questions. So I think the age doesn't matter, what you study doesn't matter, but what all you do along with studying, along with doing well in the exams, will help you. Your general knowledge, the civil service exams has a large component of general knowledge, but that general knowledge helps you, but also how much you have traveled. If you say my hobby is, one of the questions is hobby, and you have some, I think students, just to do well, try and pick some quick, some typical answers and come prepared. So the moment you see their hobby, you know this is some coaching institute which has given them tips on what to say or what to answer. But as different from that, if you say, look, my hobby is hiking, I go to the Himalayas every summer, or I sort of cycle, or I swim, or anything, I go into wildlife sanctuaries, I love elephants and I follow elephants. So that lively interest in everything around you, which I talked about, and the confidence you build by doing collective activities in various forms, in whatever forms and manner you can, by participating in NGO activities, by doing social work in some manner, by helping elderly people in your family or in your society, by helping people with disabilities of one kind or the other, the differently abled people, by your supporting your younger siblings. It could be anything. The world is open, but that if you can talk about all that and if you can bring that into your interview, the confidence will automatically come to you, and then you will be seen as a well-rounded person who would be a great asset to the government in terms of the civil services.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So there's a few more questions. So I would be asking you, like like Brigu has asked, how to handle the pressure when there's disturbances in a country where you are posted, like what had happened recently in Afghanistan.
Well, this is truly a challenge. Afghanistan was the most difficult place for an Indian diplomat to work in. It can also happen in a place like Pakistan. It is not, there can be tensions in China, but not to that extent. But that is truly the challenge of a diplomat. Before you go there, you need to be prepared for it. You need to always keep a calm mind. You need to have your contacts with whoever concerned, whether it is the local foreign office, the local security establishment, presuming they will support you when it comes to a crisis. And then you should have your communication links with India open. The foreign ministry and the government will always stand by you, advise you, guide you, and support you. So you're not all alone when you meet, when you confront these challenges. But more important than anything else, you need to be very aware and watchful of what is happening around you. If there is anything suspicious, if you, like in India, people say, don't, if you see a unattended suitcase, there is a risk of a bomb, and inform a policeman immediately. Similarly, as a diplomat too, living and working in a strange place, anything that you see around is something you have to be watchful about, and you should be careful, and you have to use every instinct and every skill that you have to make sure that not only do you do a great job, but you're also not harmed or hurt in that process.
Yeah, definitely, sir. So thank you so much, sir. It was such an intriguing session and enriching experience to have a talk with you. So now I'll be calling Sufyan to present the vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. I am Mohammed Sufyan Khan on behalf of the Civil Services Forum.
Sufyan, you're not properly audible. If you can speak a little more loudly, or if you can come a little more closer to the mic.
Audible now?
No, it's not.
Is it audible now?
Yes, it's better now.
Okay. Thank you, Amani. Good evening, everyone. I am Mohammed Sufyan Khan on behalf of the Civil Services Forum at St. Stephen College. Feel honored and privileged to get the opportunity to propose a vote of thanks on this special occasion. Thank you is just a prayer that cannot be seen or touched. It must be felt by the heart. We are grateful to respected Mr. Venu Rajamoni sir for sharing his time and his wise words with all of us. Thank you, sir. Your gracious presence has made us this event enriching and inspiring. We couldn't have asked for any better. Also, we express our heartfelt gratitude to all the guests present today. I'd like to specially thank the principal of our college, Professor John Verghese, who's always been a constant support and encouraged us to take up this initiative from time to time. Thank you once again, sir. We also expressed our heartfelt gratitude to Ms. Divya Bambri ma'am, our staff advisor, for guiding us. We hope you all had something to take away from this informative talk. Your participation is overwhelming and highly appreciated. And by this, we are proud to announce that we have completed our annual fest colloquium of Civil Services Forum, St. Stephen College, and hope that we made it enriching and inspiring by your active participation and interaction. It was a great time with you all. I, on behalf of the Civil Services Forum, pass my warm thanks to all the audience for their significant presence in this function. We are also thankful to all the volunteers for their valuable efforts. We appreciate their hearty efforts and firm determination. All of them work round the clock for making this institution or this program a grand success. Thank you all, and we hope to see you all in our future events as well. You could follow us on our social media platforms to know more about the society activities and events. Thank you. And I request the participant to wait, and we'll be announcing the winners of the colloquial quiz soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I leave, let me just say that I enjoyed this interaction and I would be happy to meet all of you in person and interact at some future date if there is a suitable opportunity or a convenient opportunity. I'd love to visit St. Stephen's College at some point. And secondly, please do also, all of you who are listening or all of you who were part of the event, send feedback on what I said, and if Dikshit or the other organizers can sort of collate all the responses from people, it will also give me a sense of how much you liked or you enjoyed the session or how much you found it useful. Okay, thank you very much. Lovely meeting all of you, and all the best for your studies and for the civil service exams.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. And really looking forward to meet you in person. And we will certainly invite you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Have a
Thank you
nice
so much, sir. Have a
Thank you,
nice
sir.
evening ahead.
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
It was really very enriching session, sir. Thank you very much.
I would request the audience members to stay back. We'll be announcing the winners of the Colo quiz, which happened during the day one of our annual festival colloquium. Unfortunately, during the closing ceremony, our principal, Professor John Verghese, could not attend due to some urgent administrative work at his end. So I would like to humbly take this opportunity to announce the winners. So you may kindly note. For Colo Quiz 2022 on day one, the first position has been gained by Souvik Biswas. Souvik Biswas is from second year BA Honors History, Hindu College. Congratulations, Souvik, if you're here. Second position has been garnered by Himanshu Jeff. He's from second year BA Political Science Honors, Hindu College. And third position has been garnered by Manvi Lohan. She's a student, a second year student from BA program, St. Stephen's College. The details of the participants will also be announced on social media of Civil Services Forum. So you may please go and follow that so that you are kindly updated of all the further events which we organize as forum. Thank you so much for joining in. At this, we have come to the end of our 4-day persistence of annual fest of Civil Services Forum Colloquium. I would request the members of organizing committee and council members to stay back. Other audience members can kindly give their feedback in the chat box. If it is not accessible, I would request the host to keep it accessible, and you may leave. Thank you so much. You may record the stop the recording.